Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our press conference. My name is Khaldun Azhari. I'm a member of the club, and I will be the MC today. And I would like to introduce our guests at the table, but start first with our interpreter, Miss Mary Joyce, who will have certainly hard work today. And then to my right is Mr. Ryu Honma. He's the author of a very famous, controversial book, Dentsu to Genpatsu Hodo, Dentsu and the Nuclear Coverage. This book has caused a lot of stir in Japan a few years ago, and now Mr. Honma is going to talk about the issue of the Olympics and its money-related reports. And it seems that the immense, I will read from our announcement because we have official introduction. The immense role of advertising giant Dentsu in the business of the Olympics has come under scrutiny. It was alleged to have influenced Japanese bidders' decision to pay a total of more than $2 million to a consultancy in 2013. Before and after they won the right to host the 2020 Summer Olympics in Tokyo. Dentsu has rejected these allegations and has told the media that it only advised the bid leaders on the consultant's track record as a lobbyist. And Mr. Honma, who told the club in 2012, this is his second visit, that Dentsu helped squash negative media coverage of leading Japanese companies involved in the nuclear industry after the 2011 Fukushima disaster. Is coming also today to challenge its Olympic endeavor. Also, he said he has no first-hand knowledge or information of the alleged Tokyo bid payments. He will discuss the growing influence of money in sports. And it seems that we will have in the Olympics a festival of business rather than a very much festival of sports, as in the way he put it. And Mr. Honma, our guest speaker, has worked for 18 years until 2006 at Dentsu's domestic rival, Ryu Hodo. He will talk today about the biggest Japanese marketing firm, Dentsu, that he said it was sponsored, including such mainstream media in Japan. And we will have the session today for about between 20 to 40 minutes, including translation, interpretation, and that will be followed by questions and answers until 2 o'clock. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest today, Mr. Honma. Thank you.
皆様こんにちは、本間でございます。
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Honma.
今日はですね、正直言いましてこんなに多くの人にお集まりいただけるとは全く予想しておらず、やはり電通さんの名前は偉大だなと思っております。
Today, to be honest, I'm actually quite surprised at how many people are present here, and I think this really shows to me the great power of the name of Dentsu.
私はですね、博報堂という、電通に、次ぐ、広告代理店の会社に18年間営業として勤めておりました。
I personally have the experience of having worked at Ryu Hodo, the second largest advertising agency in Japan, following Dentsu in Japan. I was there for 18 years working as sales, within sales.
営業というのは、お金の出し入れ、一番重要なことですが、クライアントとのそのお金のやり取りというのを担当しているので、一番広告代理店にとっては難しく、一番情報が集まる部局です。
And the sales division within an advertising firm is, of course, where the money is coming in and out. It is also that which is responsible for relationships with the clients, and particularly the financial relationships with clients as well. So the position in charge of that is within the advertising agency, perhaps one of the most difficult, but also the place where most information also comes together.
ですので今回今、電通の名前がオリンピックの裏金で、出てきていますが、私はそれをそばで見ていたわけではないので、それで今日そこに対して爆弾発言があるわけではないのですが、いわゆる営業の経験者として、同じような業界、同じような仕事をしていた人間として、もし質問があればまた後でお答えしたいと思います。
And of course, we are facing today the significant issue of the discussion about the off-the-books money in relationship to the Olympic Games and Dentsu. I personally was not, I don't have direct access to first-hand information in regards to that, so I won't be making any explosive comments or so on about that particular issue today. However, based on my experience working in the same job within the same industry for many years, if there are any questions about this, I would be happy to take them.
で本日は私の方からですね、あまり皆様がご存知でいない、オリンピック、今度の東京オリンピックに関する、大きな問題を一つ、ご紹介をしたいと思っております。
And for my part today, I would like to introduce one significant issue in regards to the Tokyo Olympics, which perhaps many of you are not yet so familiar with.
現在フランス検察当局が発表したオリンピック裏金疑惑で、2020年の東京オリンピック招致活動において賄賂の受け渡しがあったのではないかということが、世界中で話題になっていますが、日本の、その中に、日本最大の広告会社、電通の名前がありました。
And of course, these days, the news about the French prosecutors' investigation into the 2020 bid from Tokyo and the suspicion of bribes having been involved within this bidding process is, of course, making headlines around the world. And the fact that Dentsu, Japan's largest advertising firm, or the name is coming up in relation to this is something gaining great attention.
4年前私はですね、この、電通と原発報道という本を書いてですね、その時にもうすでに、電通というのは日本のメディアにとって非常にアンタッチャブルな存在であるということを、ここに書いて、でこちらの方でお話をさせていただきました。
As mentioned in the introduction, 4 years ago I authored the book Dentsu and the Nuclear Coverage. And in my book, and also at the time when I had a chance to speak at a press conference here at the club as well, I talked about the fact that within the Japanese media, Dentsu is seen as something very much untouchable. And this is at play today also.
世界中でですね、この裏金疑惑が非常に、話題になっていると。で世界のメディアでも報道されているというのは皆さんご承知の通りだと思いますが、日本のメディアは非常に、驚くほど静かな対応をしています。
And of course, you are all aware of the fact that the suspicions around whether bribes had been made or off-the-books money in relation to the Tokyo Olympic bid is in the media around the world today. However, in the Japanese media, it is almost surprisingly not even present at all.
で私は毎朝ですね、主要な全国紙、朝日、毎日、読売、日経、産経、それと東京新聞ですか、をチェックしていますが、この問題を大きく扱う、また電通の存在というものを大きく扱ったというのは、先月5月19日の東京新聞だけで、他の新聞はほとんど大きくは扱っていません。
And every morning I am purchasing or having delivered all of the main national newspapers here in Japan, the Asahi, Mainichi, Yomiuri, Nikkei, and Sankei, and the Tokyo Shimbun, the Tokyo newspaper as well. However, the only newspaper within this time to actually make a large report on this Olympics controversy, and particularly questioning the role of Dentsu within this, was the Tokyo Shimbun in last month on May 19th. And the others are barely even putting any articles on this issue.
で他の新聞社は非常に扱いが小さく、電通のその広報が、我が社は一切関係ないといったことだけを何回も掲載しているだけです。
And in regards to the other newspapers, the only reporting is in very small articles, which repeatedly quote the publicity department of Dentsu, saying that they have absolutely no relationship with this issue.
その一言で簡単に言ってしまえば、すべての新聞社やメディアが、電通の名前を報じたがらないのは、電通から巨大な広告費が流れているからです。
And to put it very simply, the reason that all of these newspapers and the media at large are not keen to put the word Dentsu in their reporting, in their articles, is of course the fact that there are huge amounts of advertising fees coming via Dentsu.
でそこについてはですね、また多分特に海外の方はご質問があると思うので、後ほどいろいろお話ができればいいと思うんですが、まず今日はもう一つのお話をちょっとさせていただきたいと思います。
And I am sure that many of you have questions in regards to this, particularly for our correspondents who are here today. But I would like to come back to that issue a little bit later, and perhaps in the question and answer time as well. And there is one further point which I would like to raise.
今日こちらの方にですね、オリンピックのそのスポンサーの表を出しています。ものすごい数が集まっています。
Here at the front we have a panel showing the different Olympic sponsors, and you can see the very high number of sponsors which are listed here.
過去のオリンピックと比較をしてもですね、現在の段階で巨額のスポンサー契約を集めながらですね、実際のオリンピックの現場の作業はすべて無償のボランティアにやらせようとしているということを皆さんにお伝えしたいと思います。
And the point which I would like to share with you today is the fact that even in comparison to past Olympics, the amount of fees through sponsor contracts is reaching an extremely high level now. However, at the time of the Tokyo Olympics, the actual on-site operations are going to be left to unpaid volunteers.
もともとオリンピックの実行主体というのは国だったわけです。ボランティアも1948年のロンドン五輪から登場しました。
And in regards to the role of volunteers at the Olympics, well, originally the host of the Olympics is the national government or the state itself, and it is since the 1948 London Olympics when there has been such a role for volunteers.
それは国家予算だけではとてもすべての事業を賄えなかったので、善意の人々の無償の労働に頼らざるを得なかったからです。64年の東京五輪でももちろんボランティアの方々が活躍しました。
And the reason for this is that at the time the national budget would not be sufficient to cover all of the costs incurred in the hosting of the Olympics in London at that time. Therefore, they relied on the unpaid work of many good-willed citizens or good-willed people to become involved. And during the 1964 Olympics here in Tokyo, also there was a significant role of volunteers.
オリンピックがアマチュアスポーツの祭典であった時代は、ボランティアがいなければすべての経営が非常に難しかった。しかし84年のアメリカで行われたロス五輪からロサンゼルスオリンピックから、スポンサー収入とテレビの放映権料の収入で大会運営費を賄うようになりました。
And at the time when the Olympics was primarily a festival for amateur sports, this role of volunteers was indeed completely necessary to run the operations. However, since the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics in the United States, actually the system has changed so that the overall running costs of the Olympics are now covered by sponsorship fees and also the fees from the purchase of broadcasting rights of the Olympics.
そのようにして巨額のお金を集められるようになったにもかかわらず、なぜか無償のボランティアはなくならず、オリンピックといえばボランティアという主催者にとって極めて便利な幻想だけが、残されてきました。
However, despite the fact that now in the Olympics there are these immense sums of fees and money being gathered and put towards the holding of the Olympics, for some reason this utilization of unpaid volunteers as the central part of the Olympics has remained as part of the system, which means that we have a system now which is extremely convenient for the organizers in that people have a sense that, well, the Olympics equals volunteers. Volunteership is a big part of the Olympics.
そしてその最もグロテスクな形が次の東京五輪で、姿を現そうとしています。
And there is now momentum showing that the most grotesque of this form will actually appear at the upcoming Tokyo Olympics.
現在東京オリンピックのスポンサー集めは非常に順調です。
The gathering of sponsors for the Tokyo Olympics is now going extremely well.
現在までに国内最高位のスポンサーゴールドパートナーに15社。ゴールドパートナーというのは今ここに出ているこの2つ目ですね。上はワールドワイドなんですが、ゴールドパートナーにすでに15社、決まっています。
In regards to the domestic sponsors for the Olympics, the highest category of these are called the gold partners, and there are already 15 such corporations confirmed. They are the second category listed on the panel here. The first category is the worldwide sponsors.
でその3番目にオフィシャルパートナーというのももうすでに19社決まっております。
And in the third category, the official partners, there are already 19 companies confirmed.
で問題はその契約金額ですけれども、ゴールドパートナーは1社150億円以上で、オフィシャルパートナーが60億円以上というふうにされています。
And the issue at hand here to be paid attention to is the contract fees involved in this sponsorship agreement. For the gold partners, it is said to be 15 billion yen at least per company, and for the official partners, 6 billion yen per company at least.
ですから開催まであと4年もある今の段階ですでに少なくとも3390億円という金額が集まっている計算になります。
And so, even though we are now at the stage where it's still 4 years to go until the Olympics, this is showing that there is already, at a minimum, 339 billion Japanese yen already put forward in sponsorship fees for the Olympics.
ちなみにこれがですね、前回の、これロンドンオリンピックのホームページから取ってきたんですけども、前回のロンドンでの協賛者は、全部で14社しかありません。
And in a comparison, I am holding here a panel of the final sponsors for the London Olympic Games. This was taken from the homepage of the official homepage of the London Olympics. You can see here that there is a total number of sponsors of only 14.
また2014年のソチオリンピックですね、ソチオリンピックでも、協賛者は、全部で11社しかありません。
And in regards to the 2014 Sochi Winter Olympic Games, there was actually only a total of 11 companies in a sponsorship agreement at that time.
しかも、日本の場合はまだあと4年ありますので、今ここにあるものよりももっと数を増やそうとしています。
And of course, there is still 4 years remaining until the holding of the Tokyo Olympics as well. So it is expected that the number of sponsors will also continue to increase from here.
この表には出てこないんですが、この、今の、オフィシャルパートナーの下にですね、オフィシャルサポーターという、カテゴリーを作って、大体30億円ぐらいのカテゴリーを新しく作る予定です。
And it is not listed on this panel here, but there will also be a third category soon to be announced, which will follow on from the official partners. It will be the official supporters, and it's expected that that will be around a 3 billion yen amount.
この表を見ていただくとですね、オリンピックというのがすでにスポーツの祭典ではなくてですね、企業のための祭典であるというようなことが、皆さんご理解いただけるんじゃないかと思います。
And so I believe that looking at these panels and this information can very much demonstrate that the Olympics are no longer a festival for sports, but instead they have become a festival for corporations.
でなぜですね、では、ロンドンオリンピックやソチに比べてこんなに多くの企業をスポンサーに入れることができたのかといいますとですね、過去のオリンピックでは協賛者を1業種1社というふうに絞っていたんですね。ですから、トヨタが入れば日産は入れないというふうに絞っていたんですが、東京オリンピックはですね、特例として、1業種2社までは認めるということで、今非常に多くの企業が入ってきています。
And so why is it that there are so many more sponsors for the Tokyo Olympics in comparison to past Olympic Games? One of the main reasons for this is in the past there was a regulation that there could only be one sponsoring corporation per industry. So for example, if Toyota were to become a sponsor, then Nissan would not be eligible to be a sponsor for the Games. However, there has been a special case made for the Tokyo Olympics, and up to 2 corporations per industry are being permitted to have official sponsorship. This is leading to an increase in the number of the sponsoring organizations.
先ほど現段階ですでに3390億円が集まっているはずだというふうに申し上げたんですが、過去の夏季オリンピックで、国内協賛金収入が最多だったと言われているのが北京 北京大会でこの時の協賛金収入は1500億だったと言われています。ですのでまだオリンピックが始まる4年もあるのにですね、すでにその倍以上の金額を集めているということです。
And so I just mentioned that the total amount of sponsorship fees which has already been gathered for the Tokyo Olympics is 339 billion yen. If we compare this to the Olympics, which in the past had the highest income from sponsorship fees, which was the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games, the total amount in Beijing was 150 billion yen. So we can see that although there is still 4 years until the holding of the Tokyo Olympic Games, this has already reached double the amount of the sponsorship fees.
でこの点に関してですね、メディアが絶対に話したがらないことが1点あるんですが、この金額、この3390億円に対してですね、電通は管理費または管理進行費という名目でだいたい 20% ぐらいの取り分があると思われます。
And there is one point which much of the media does not want to refer to in regards to this sponsorship fee, but this is the fact that actually of the 339 billion Japanese yen which has been gathered already in sponsorship fees, actually Dentsu is given around a 20% of this under the name of management or facilitation fees for this.
ですので、20% 取っているということは、だいたい電通は現時点で600億円以上の収益を上げているというふうに思われます。
Therefore, if we calculate approximately 20% of this total amount of sponsorship fees which have already been gathered, this shows us that Dentsu is at least obtaining around 60 billion Japanese yen from these sponsorship agreements.
ただ誤解のないように申し上げておきたいんですが、このいわゆるフィーといいますか管理費というのは、広告代理店にとってはごくごく普通の仕事であります。でないとただ働きになってしまうので、ただ金額が非常に巨大であるということです。
To make sure that this is not being misleading, I would like to stress that this is a very normal practice within the advertising industry. Having this kind of amount for the management or facilitation fees is very much part of the usual way of operating for advertising firms. Of course, otherwise their services would be offered for free in a way. However, I would like to bring your attention to the fact that this is an enormous amount of money involved.
ちなみに東京五輪のその招致委員会というのがですね、招致ファイルというのを作ってます。その中で見込んでいた、今回東京五輪のオリンピックのですね総予算をよくわかんないんですけど3400億円というふうに見込んでいました。
In regards to the Tokyo Bidding Committee, the files that were submitted as part of this had an estimate of a total budget for the Olympics of around 340 billion yen.
これがですね、今のオリンピック委員会が掲示している、これホームページから取ってきたものですが、全体の収入で、どれぐらいその広告を、全体の中で何で、収入があるかという、これ表なんですけど、その中でローカルスポンサーシップで 27% を、賄うというふうに書いてある。このローカルスポンサーシップをですね、招致の段階では920億円ぐらいだというふうに見込んでいました。
And so this panel here is from the homepage of the Tokyo Olympic Bid Committee, and it is showing the overall expected income in relation to the Tokyo Games, and showing where this income is expected to be coming from. And the figure here, 27%, is relating to the local sponsorship. So at the time of the bidding, the proposal or the estimate was that 27% of the income for the Games would be coming from local sponsorship fees, and this was estimated to be around 92 billion Japanese yen at the time.
ですから3400億円かかるという中で広告が920億円ぐらいだろうという予想をしていたわけです。
And so the estimate at the time is showing that the expected overall budget would be around 340 billion Japanese yen, and of that 92 billion would be coming from sponsorship fees or income from sponsorship fees.
ところが先ほどから申し上げている通り、すでにスポンサー契約金だけで3300億円以上が集まっているわけです。
However, as we just mentioned as well, the amount of the sponsorship fees or contract fees for sponsorships which have already come in is more than this 340
というこ
billion.
とは3400億円かかると言っていた全体の予算をもうすでに今のスポンサーから集めた契約で全てを賄えるぐらいのお金をもう集めてしまっているということになります。
Which this demonstrates actually that the number or the amount of sponsorship fees which have already been guaranteed through the existing contracts is already increasing or already exceeding what the expected overall budget of the Olympics was planned to be.
つまり、スポンサー収入だけで、オリンピックを賄うぐらいのお金を集めてしまっているわけですが、これだけ集めたお金はまあ要するに黒字として計上して、その余ったお金が一体どこに行くのかということが大きな問題になると思うんですが、この点に関しては JOC は開示義務がないとして、そういう細かい予算項目を、非開示にしています。
And so in regards to this, if we look at the amount of sponsor income which has already been guaranteed, we see that it would be possible to hold the entire Olympics just from these fees which are coming in from the sponsors. Of course, and this fee will be recorded, in the black within the accounting and so on. However, where does this extra money go? The Japan Olympic Committee actually is stating at the moment that it has no responsibility to make such figures public, and it has not made public the detailed categorization and so on of the budgeting and the accounting in regards to this.
ですが、皆様ご承知の通り、新国立競技場またはこれから作ろうとしている各種施設の建設費などで、東京オリンピックに関しては2兆円から3兆円の実施費がかかるんじゃないかというふうに言われています。でそれは要するに箱物を作ったり道路を建設したりするのにお金がかかると言っているわけですが、そちらの方はすべて税金で賄おうとしているのに、3000億円を集めているスポンサー料は別の財布だから中身を見せなくていいというふうに JOC が今言っているわけです。でそんなことは許されないことだと思います。
And of course, as you are aware, the construction of facilities, including the new national stadium and other related facilities and so on for the Olympics, is expected to go up to a cost of around 2 to 3 trillion Japanese yen. And this is all coming from taxes for this. This is mostly infrastructure, building buildings, roads, and so on as well. However, the fact that there is this excessive amount of sponsorship fees which have already been raised, yet the Japanese Olympic Committee is saying, well, these are going into a separate wallet. These are a separate account, and so we don't need to make this public. We don't need to show this. So this is something which I believe should not be acceptable.
それで、さらに、この巨大な金額を集めておきながら、先ほども申し上げましたが、実際の、オリンピックの運営は10万人にも上る無償のボランティアにやらせようとしています。
And also, despite the fact that these vast amounts of money have been raised for the Olympics, the actual operations on the day is going to be left to the responsibility of volunteers, of whom it's said that there will be around 100,000 volunteers mobilized.
日本に長くお住まいの、もちろん日本人なら当然ですが、日本に長くお住まいの特派員の皆さんも、日本の夏の過酷さはよくご承知だと思います。
And I'm sure those of you who are either Japanese or have been living here in Japan for a while are very aware of the harshness of the Japanese summer during July and August.
その中で無償のボランティアの人たちは、例えば交通整理ですとか駐車場整理ですとか、日本で一番暑いと言われている7月から8月にかけてタダで働かせられようとしています。
And despite the fact that this will be during the hottest season here in Japan, these many unpaid volunteers will be expected to be working for free in jobs such as, guiding people in car parks or traffic management and so on.
東京五輪市場の東京五輪は市場空前のスポンサー収入を見込んでいるんであれば、ボランティアにもそれ相応の例えば保険料を出してあげるですとか、日当を支払うですとか、そういうことをするべきだと思います。
And therefore, I believe that if such an unprecedented amount of sponsorship fees are being gathered for the Tokyo Olympics, then there should be a responsibility to, at the very least, provide insurance, for example, for these volunteers who will be taking on these roles, or provide them with a daily stipend for their work.
こういうお話をしますと、ボランティアは自分でやりたいって言ってるんだからいいじゃないかという人は必ずいます。
When these kinds of issues are raised, there are, of course, always people who say, well, volunteers are wanting to do this themselves, so that should be fine, that's not a problem.
それはそういう精神、ボランティア精神というのは僕も大変尊いと思います。ですが、今回のそれは例えばお金がないところに、お金がないから無償でそれを助けてあげるというのがやはりボランティア精神だと思うのです。ですが、先ほどからご説明している通り、お金は有り余るほど集まってます。で、さらに増えるでしょう。そういう現実があるのに、それには目をつぶって、そういう現実をきちんとお話をしないで、ボランティアを集めるというのは、僕はこれは、簡単に言ってしまえば犯罪的な行為だと思います。
And so, of course, there is something to be known as the volunteer spirit or the spirit of volunteerism, which is something, of course, to be praised. However, I believe that this should come to work in a situation where, for example, there is not sufficient resources or sufficient money, and so volunteers step in to fill the gap, step in to support, and so on. However, as I have explained, there is an enormous amount of money already being raised for these Olympics, even to the point of being excessive. And this is still on the increase. This will continue to increase in the years from now. Yet, there are these efforts now to gather many volunteers for the Olympics. So I believe that despite the fact that there is such a reality, closing their eyes to this issue and not even discussing this is something which, to put very simply, I think is even a criminal act.
オリンピックとパラリンピックでだいたい30日間、ボランティアを働かせようとしていますが、例えばその30日間、10万人に1人1万円を支払ったとしても300億円で済んでしまうわけです。
And for the duration of the Olympic and Paralympic Games, it is expected to be around 30 days when there will be volunteers at work. If we consider that there will be 100,000 volunteers, and if they were to be given a stipend of a mere 10,000 Japanese yen per day, the total for this for the entire month would come to only 30 billion Japanese yen.
すでに3000億円を集めて、協会関係者は5000億円以上集めようというふうに言っているようですが、それだけのお金があるんであれば、1人1万円の日当を払っても十分ボランティアに気分よく働いてもらえるようになるんではないでしょうか。
And so if we are in a situation where there is already more than 300 billion Japanese yen gathered, and those in the industry are saying that they are looking to increase this to up to even 500. If we look at the fact that there is so much money already involved, then I think at the very least these volunteers should be able to be provided with such a stipend as 10,000 yen per day to ensure that they can work comfortably.
ちなみにもう少し詳しくそのボランティアがどういう環境に置かれているかといいますと、日本の冬の長野オリンピックの時ですが、これは、もちろん完全な無償です。で、保険に入ることももちろんできなかった。要するにすべて、オリンピック委員会が保険とかそういうのはもちろん出していません。で、会場に行くまでの交通費というのもすべて自腹であったと。
And so to give an example of the kind of environment in which the volunteers will be working, we can look at the example of the Nagano Winter Olympic Games, which had been held in Japan. Of course, there were many unpaid volunteers involved in this. At the time, the Olympic Committee did not cover or pay for insurance for them at the time. Also, their transportation to and from their working sites and so on was also to be borne by the volunteers themselves.
ですので、黙っていると次の東京も必ずそうなります。
Therefore, if we are silent on this issue, then Tokyo will, of course, also go down the same road.
で、私は去年の秋ぐらいからこの問題についてあちこちで発言しているんですが、これについて報道をしたのはまたしても東京新聞11月24日の東京新聞でこれ1回だけです。
I have been speaking about this issue in various opportunities since around autumn of 2015. The only place where this has been reported since is once again the Tokyo Shimbun, and this is an article of November 24 last year on this issue.
日本でのその大手と言われる新聞社はこの件に関しては一社も報道していません。それはなぜかというと、このスポンサーのですね、一番下に、このスポンサー表の一番下にを見るとお分かりいただけるんですが、オフィシャルパートナーとしてですね、読売新聞、朝日新聞、毎日新聞、日経新聞がスポンサーになってしまっているということで、このように今私がお話ししているような非常に重大な問題は一度も取り上げられていないという形になっています。
And none of the mainstream national newspapers in Japan have reported at all about this issue to date. Well, what is the reason for this? If you have a look once again at the sponsorship panel, I believe that you can see this for yourselves. If you look at the category here for official partners, you can see that the Yomiuri Shimbun, Asahi, Mainichi, and Nikkei are all listed here as official sponsors or partners of the Olympic Games. And therefore, we can see that such an important issue has not been raised even once in any of these newspapers.
要するにこれもやはりJOC というよりも、電通に対する気兼ね、自粛、そういうことをやはり、メディアはやっているわけであります。今日はですね、この場をお借りしてですね、ぜひですね、この問題に関して、皆様のお力を借りてですね、全世界に、東京オリンピックには実は隠されたこういう大きな問題があるということを、報道していただければ、大変ありがたいと思っております。本日はご清聴誠にありがとうございました。
In other words, therefore, I believe that it could be said that the Japanese media is practicing this kind of self-restraint, not so much because of pressures from the Japan Olympic Committee, but actually that the role of Dentsu in this is extremely significant. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak here today, and I hope that your cooperation can also help for these hidden problems of the Tokyo Olympic Games to also be raised in the world media as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for letting us know about these billions of yens that we will get nothing out of, I guess. So we'd like to open the floor for questions and answers. Please come. If you have a question, raise your hand and come to this front mic and tell us your name and affiliation. Who would like to take the first question? Please.
Thank you. Robin Harding from the Financial Times. Two questions. First, could you talk about how and why Dentsu remains so dominant in the Japanese advertising industry? Second, for this issue of corruption or bribery, that's normally avoided by strict accounting records to track where money goes. From your experience in the Japanese advertising industry, can you point to any weaknesses or vulnerabilities in its practices that could allow something like that to occur? Thank you.
なるほど。まず一つ目はその電通がなぜここまで大きくなったかということでよかったのかな。
そうですね。影響力がここまで。
はいはいはいはい。それは電通がですね、戦後日本の新しいニューメディアであったテレビとラジオを全て独占的に扱うことができたというのが非常に大きかったですね。
First of all, in regards to the reasons for the influence or the size of Dentsu to be on such a significant scale, I think that the post-war history has a great deal to do with this. And the fact that in the post-war years, Dentsu was able to monopolize the new media, such as television and radio, had a great deal to at play here.
特に、電通も博報堂も同じですが、現在でもその収益の約3割をテレビ CM の広告費によっています。
And this is the case for both Dentsu and Hakuhodo actually, but even today around 1/3 of the company's profits comes from television commercials.
で、その約3割の収入を核として他にも新聞、雑誌、インターネットすべての領域において、非常に強い力を持っていると。
And as well as this 1/3, Dentsu also has significant power and influence in the fields of newspapers, magazines, internet, advertising, and so on also.
そのテレビだけですとか、例えばですね、海外、アメリカの広告会社もそうだと思いますが、制作代理店とメディアレップ、いわゆるメディアをする会社というのは分かれていると思います、海外では。ですが電通や博報堂のいわゆる総合広告代理店は全てを一社でできてしまう。これが海外の広告代理店と一番大きな差です。
And I believe that one of the greatest differences within the Japanese advertising agencies, and this is including Dentsu and Hodo, is that all is being done in-house. So, for example, if we look at the major United States advertising agencies, it's often the practice for the production company and the media company, for example, to be separate companies. However, in the case of Dentsu, this is all done under the same roof, within the same company. And so I think this is one particular characteristic.
それと海外と日本の一番大きな差、もう一つは一業種一社制が日本にはないということ。
And one of the other issues, I think, which means that the advertising industry within Japan is different to many of those overseas, is the fact that there are no regulations in regards to one corporation per industry.
海外では一業種一社というのは秘密保持の観点から非常に重要な部分なんですが、日本にはそういう取り決めはありません。ですから、電通も博報堂もトヨタも日産もホンダも三菱も全部やると、そういうふうにすれば、全ての、企業を抱え込むことができると。これが海外の広告代理店との一番大きな差です。
And the other great difference between the practice of the advertising industry in other companies in Japan, as a result of having this agreement, means that one company can be responsible for the accounts of Toyota, Nissan, Honda, Mitsubishi, all across the board within the same industry. In many other countries, there are regulations in place for protecting corporate secrets and so on as well, which prevent one company from being responsible for the accounts of several different companies or corporations within the same industry. However, such regulations are not at place in Japan, meaning that they can have such a great hold.
広告というのは、例えば新聞に広告を一つ載っけたらそれでいいというものではなくてですね、新聞もテレビもインターネットも全て連動して動かしていく。で、非常に高度なPR の方法なんです。ですからそれはやはり電通とか博報堂みたいに、制作もできてメディアも持ってるということで、そこのリレーションシップがうまくいくっていうことのその経験が非常に蓄積されていったと。これが他の代理店よりも大きくなった理由だと思います。
And of course, in the case of advertisements, it's not just an issue of placing one ad in a newspaper and that's it. There is very high-level PR methods and so on to ensure that advertising in newspapers, on television, on the internet, and so on are all very closely connected and linked within the advertising strategy. Companies such as Dentsu and also Hodo having their own production and media companies as well means that this relationship can be maintained in a very smooth way, and their experience, which has been accumulated in these different fields together, comes to make sure that it does have this very significant influence and size.
2番目のご質問ですが、その文章を残しているかどうか、残していないのかというご質問だったと思います。これは私は残していると思います。特にですね、2000年ぐらい以降、要するにバブルが崩壊して以降、また電通と博報堂が上場して以降は、そういういわゆる文書管理、責任の所在をはっきりさせるということに関しては非常にうるさくなりました。
And in your second request, in regards to your second question on records and so on, I believe that these records and so on are being kept in quite a strict and managed way, particularly since the collapse of the bubble era, so around the 2000s and so on, and the listing of the companies as well. The strictness within the corporations in regards to this, and also the assignment of responsibility in regards to this has become much clearer and stricter.
ですので、その文書がないっていうふうに言っているのは私は嘘だと思っています。
Therefore, I believe that the fact that they are saying now that the records don't exist or cannot be found, I believe, has to be a lie.
そんなんでいいのかな？
Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
今日はありがとうございました。早稲田大学ジャーナリズム研究所の渡辺と申します。はい、こんにちは。一業種2社というのがこのスポンサー制度で今回は特例で認められたということでしたけども、ちょっと3月まで僕朝日新聞に行ってこんなことを聞くのもあれなんですけど、なぜ新聞だけですね、朝日、読売、毎日、日経こう4業種なのかというのはまず1つ目で、あともう1つはやっぱり電通の強さは自民党をクライアントに持ってですね、ずっと蜜月関係が続いてきたというのがあると思うんですね。で博報堂にいらっしゃって自民党をクライアントとして奪ってこいというようなその競争ですかなかったのか、一時期政権交代して民主党を博報堂を持ちましたけど、それでも自民党と電通は浮気もせずに一生懸命仲良くしてたわけですよね。だからその自民党をめぐる代理店同士の戦いっていうのはどういうものだったかっていうことをお願いします。
I am a researcher in journalism at Waseda University, and I have two questions. You mentioned that there is the particular case over the Tokyo Olympics of up to 2 companies per industry being allowed. However, we can see here that there are 4 newspapers listed as official partners for the Olympics. I myself was working at Asahi until March of this year, so I'm not sure if I should be questioning this, but I'd like to ask if you can explain about the 4 newspapers being listed here. And second of all, in regards to how Dentsu has such immense strength or influence, I believe that this is also related to the fact that they have the Liberal Democratic Party as a client. I would like to ask, from your experience working at Hakuhodo, if there were discussions or efforts to bring on the LDP as a client for Hakuhodo during your time there. Although there was, of course, a change in government and DPJ is a client or was a client of Hakuhodo, even within this time, Dentsu and the LDP stayed in a very close relationship. So I would like to ask about, within your experience in the advertising industry, how this relationship with the LDP is seen. Thank you.
もともとですね、最初のご質問ですが、もともとその新聞社はその読売が単独で入るんじゃないかっていうふうな、話があったみたいなんですね。でただそれをやられると読売に全て持ってかれるので、他の新聞社が抵抗してどうしても入りたいというふうに話をしたっていうふうに、ちょっと僕は聞いたんですが、ですので、正直言ってですね、この特例で2社認めたっていうところも、所詮要するにお金がいっぱい入ってくればいいと言って簡単に言ってしまえばそういうことですから、新聞もですね、別にどうせお金払ってくれるんなら3社でも4社でもいいだろうというふうに考えたのではないかと思います。
In regards to your first question, actually it was said in the initial days that most likely it would be only the Yomiuri Shimbun as a sponsor for the Olympics. However, I heard that after this there was resistance from the other newspapers that they also wanted to join in this. And well, therefore, if we look at the reasons that there was a special regulation made so that more companies from the same industry can become sponsors, I believe that at the core, well, honestly, the reason for this is so that there can be more income coming in sponsorship fees as well. Therefore, most likely, I think they said, well, if the newspapers are willing to pay the fees, then let's take as many as are willing. Let's go up to 3 or 4.
2つ目のご質問ですが、そうですね、博報堂自民党はもうずっととにかく電通さんなんですよね。で、博報堂は民主党という形には今、形にとしてはなっているけれども、そもそもですね、その電通を選んでいるのが自民党なんですよ。で自民党はですね、自分たちは永遠にナンバーワンだと思っているので、ナンバーワン、広告代理店としか付き合いたくないというふうにですね、自民党さんが言ってるっていう話はよく聞きました。博報堂にいた時にですね。
So as you mentioned, the LDP has always worked with Dentsu as its official advertising partner, and Hakuhodo has a relationship of working with the DPJ, or formerly known as the DPJ. However, it was actually the LDP who selected Dentsu. Of course, the LDP sees themselves always or eternally as number one within the political parties. Therefore, they only want to work with number one within the advertising agencies. Therefore, the LDP has always decided to work with Dentsu. This was something that we often heard mentioned when I was working at Hakuhodo.
それともう一つですね、伝統的に電通は非常に自民党の、議員の指定が多い、ものすごくいっぱい入ってますね。指定というかですね、要するに、電通に入って3、4年電通から給料をもらって、でお父さんが、引退すると、その後ろにその地場を引き継いで議員になると、そうやって議員になった自民党の方々が何人もいます。ですからそういう人的なつながりが非常に強いですね。自民党と電通というのはもうこれ伝統ですよね。多分20人以上はいるんじゃないかなっていう気はしますね。で今でも多分いると思います。で、そういう部分で言いますと博報堂にはそういう人はいません。博報堂というのは伝統的に政治とは距離を置くという会社だったので、先ほどもその自民党を取りに行けという行かないのかということがあったんですけど、あまりそういう泥臭いですね、喧嘩というのは博報堂は得意じゃないんですね。そういうことは電通さんにお任せするというのがもう今までの伝統的なスタイルなんですね。
And one more point in regards to the relationship between the LDP and Dentsu is actually there is a very close tradition with many people who actually go on to become Diet members, spending a few years within Dentsu. So for example, people whose fathers may be Diet members, they're keeping their seats, and on retirement of the father, after having several years being on Dentsu's payroll, they will run in the election and follow in the footsteps of their partners, after their fathers. There are several cases of this within the Diet until now as well. I think perhaps even up to 20 Diet members who come from such a background, which means that the personal connections between the people at Dentsu and the LDP are extremely strong. I believe that even within the Diet today, it's most likely that there are some people from such a background. However, Hakuhodo does not have such cases or such a background or way of operating. Actually, traditionally, Hakuhodo has more tended to separate itself from politics. And so in regards to your question about whether within Hakuhodo there were efforts to go and take on the LDP as a client and so on, I think this is not really one of the strong points of Hakuhodo going into these struggles and so on. So Hakuhodo would leave this up to Dentsu and not go into competition over that.
そんな感じでいいですか。はい。
Thank you. Joël Lejean from the French Radio and Television. I'd like to come back on this issue of alleged corruption of Tokyo for the bidding committee. What is your opinion about it? Where are we? The organizing committee and the bidding committee are different, as Mr. Mori said. Nevertheless, it doesn't mean that there was no improper manners used by the bidding committee. I'd like to hear your opinion about that. What do you think exactly happened, and how can you structurally explain those things with Dentsu issues, indeed, which comes back to the question asked by my FT colleague before. Thank you.
ですね、そもそも JOC というのはですね、すみません、関係者がいらっしゃるとちょっと怒られるかもしれないんですが、いろんな官庁からの寄せ集めでですね、そのマーケティングのことですとかですね、PR のことについての専門家なんてのはいないんですよね。でその仕事っていうのはすべて電通の出向者がやっているんです。
First of all, in regards to the JOC, and perhaps if there are people here who are connected to this, they might not be so happy with this. But the members of the JOC are brought together from representatives of various government agencies and so on. So within the membership, there is no particular expertise in PR or marketing and so on. This is therefore all contracted to Dentsu.
もちろん電通は表には 出てこないで JOC または招致委員会というふうに必ずクレジットされるわけですが、中身の仕事というのはもうほぼほぼ電通の皆さんに頼り切っているというのが実情なんですよね。
And so the name of Dentsu may not come to the forefront in regards to what is coming out from the JOC or the bid committee and so on. However, the contents of what is being worked in within that is almost all completely dependent on Dentsu.
ですので、招致委員会ですとか、現在のオリンピック委員会ですとか、委員が変わったから、今回のあれが賄賂の動きがわからないというのはですね、全くのナンセンスであってですね、電通、その要するに電通の人間は変わらずずっとその招致委員会からいるので、彼らは非常によく分かっていると思います。
And so in regards to the discussion about the fact that, well, there are different members within the committee who were involved in the bid and the current Olympic committee. So the fact that they're saying that because of this difference in the membership, they're not aware or they don't have the full information about these suspicions and so on, I believe that this is complete nonsense. Within this whole time frame, there have been the same people from Dentsu involved in the various stages of these committees as well. And they are, of course, very much in complete understanding of the situation and what was happening at the time.
でその賄賂に関してなんですけどね、その日本はですね、1988年に名古屋オリンピック、それと2008年に大阪でオリンピックを開こうとして失敗しました。招致に失敗したんですね。でそれをですね、なぜ失敗したのかということをやはりいろいろとつぶさに検証したら、はっきり言って賄賂が足りなかったんではないかということになったんだと思います。
And in regards to the issue of bribery, of course, or the suspected bribes, of course, Japan has the experience of failing in the bids for Olympics in the past. In 1988, the bid for the Olympics in Nagoya, and then in 2008 for Osaka. And after these failures, of course, there was a lot of research and consideration that went into why it was that these failures occurred. And I think that the conclusion they probably came to was that the bribes weren't enough.
で今回はその東京でやるということですから、これは名古屋とか大阪でやるというよりもやっぱり重要性が全く違うんですね。絶対に勝たなければならなかったということであればですね、その時に賄賂をよこせっていう人物がいれば、それは勝つためには渡さなければならないという判断をしたのだと思います。もしですね、これ別に私電通に恨みがあるわけでも何でもないんで、例えばもし私がその招致委員会の中で、その仕事をしていたとしたら、広告代理店の要するに電通または博報堂という広告代理店の人間として、そういうところにお金を払えば必ず勝てるというふうに思えば、おそらくやったのではないかと思います。
However, of course, when we look at the fact that this bid was for Tokyo, this means it's on a completely different scale of importance for Japan than in comparison with the cases of Nagoya or Osaka. It was on the level of it must win at all costs. Therefore, I believe that there was a system, well, if someone were to come about and ask for a bribe, then they would make sure that they would be given to this. And I'm not saying this with any negative impression and so on for Dentsu. If I myself had been working as someone from the advertising agency within the bid committee, I believe that probably I would also have gone ahead with paying this money for a bribe if it would guarantee that the bid would be successful. This is the way of operating within the industry.
そんな感じですけど。
I hope this answers the question.
Yes, Martin and Jumbo-san, please. And then you. So you admit you would bribe somebody for this. This is on the record, by the way.
Martin Köllinger, Handelsblatt from Germany. I would like to go back a little bit on the question of Dentsu in the media. I would like to understand a bit better how big the share of Dentsu is in TV advertisement and also newspaper advertisement, and then how actually this pressure really works. do advertisement agencies, especially in Japan and especially Dentsu, apply pressure on the media? And then the third part of the question is, how vulnerable are the newspapers, especially the three of them, or two of them below, by having also a TV station? That this connection between TV station and newspaper might make them even more vulnerable for pressure, I guess. Could you talk about that a little bit?
もちろん、ですね、じゃあ最初のご質問で、その電通がシェアがどれぐらいなんだということなんですが、これはいろいろな見方があってですね、一概には言えないんですけども、テレビで言えばおそらく6割から7割ぐらいのシェアがあると思います。新聞でだいたい3割から4割というぐらいではないかというふうに思っています。
In regards to the first part of your question, there are several different ways to calculate the share, but I would make an estimate that Dentsu's share within the television advertising field would be around 60 to 70%, and in regards to newspapers, around 30 to 40.
で、よくですね、海外の方がですね、どうやって電通は圧力をかけるんだというふうにですね、お聞きになるんですね。でそれはですね、圧力というのはお前こうしろというふうな言い方ではないんです。
And in regards to the second part of your question, often people from other countries do ask about how exactly it is that Dentsu does put this pressure into place. And I think that this pressure is not so much in the way of giving orders about what to do or what not to do.
一番大きいのはですね、電通がその直接命令を下すというよりも、メディア側の方がですね、自粛してしまうと。戦う前に自粛してしまうというのは一番大きな問題であるというふうに私は感じています。
And I think that actually the most significant or the largest way that this happens is not so much direct orders coming from Dentsu, but actually self-restraint on the media side. So before even raising to a challenge or before trying to raise issues or fight against this, actually the media will already restrain itself.
最も一般的なですね、圧力といいますか、その自粛の方程式っていうのは、もし電通の言うことを聞かなかったら、今度は広告を出してもらえなくなるんじゃないか、出してもらえるとか広告を、中継してもらえなくなるのではないかっていうことなんですね。
And so I think the most common method or the most common way in which this comes about is people are afraid that, well, if we don't listen to Dentsu or if we don't pay attention to what they would expect, then there would be a fear that, the advertisements would not be placed or so on.
でその広告、別にどこでもいいんですが、例えばトヨタの広告が、今まで、月間10億円出ていたのになぜか5億円に減っちゃったと。でそれは何でかっていうふうに思うと、なぜか電通が自分のメディアじゃなくて他のメディアにそのトヨタの広告を持っていってたというような形、それが、そういうことができるんですね。博報堂とか電通だったらそれができる。
And so an example for this, of course, any company could be given an example, but we could say that, well, Toyota had to date been placing 1 billion Japanese yen worth of advertisements in a particular media. All of a sudden, this is reduced to half, to around 500 million yen worth. Therefore, the media would start to think that, well, Dentsu has taken their business elsewhere, that they have moved this from their media to a different company. And Dentsu and Hakuhodo do have the power or the capacity to do such things.
そこで、じゃあどうして今までうちに広告出してくれたのになんであっちにやるんだよって言って喧嘩すればいいんですよ、メディアが。ところが今の日本人はですね、和を尊ぶ人たちなのでですね、非常に自粛するのが早い、もう喧嘩したくないんですね、揉めたくない。電通と揉めてその扱いがこれ以上減ったりしたらどうするんだって、そういう、すぐ自粛してしまう、そういうやっぱりこの日本人特有の、これ外国人の方とやっぱ全然メンタリティが違いますよね。そこを戦わない。でそれがバブル崩壊で広告費がものすごく減ったということで、 もうそういう広告費がもうこれ以上減るのはもう勘弁してくれっていう気分がメディアには蔓延してます。
And so the reason that, well, the media, for example, would start to think about why is it that Dentsu or that the advertising has decreased so much and has been moved to different media, you would think that the media would go to Dentsu and raise such questions and ask about this. However, there is a tendency within people in Japan or Japanese people to sort of seek harmony and self-restrain very quickly rather than going into a conflict or an argument on these kinds of issues. While it could be raised and should be debated and discussed and so on, there is also the fear on the media's side that if they raise this as an issue, then the advertising would decrease even further. Therefore, I think that this is somewhat related to perhaps a particular Japanese mentality, which is maybe not existing in some other countries, that there is this tendency not to even go for the challenge, not to put up a fight in regards to this. And I think this is very much connected from the history of the time of the collapse of the bubble, when the advertising income and so on decreased so much that within the media there is really a fear that the advertising amounts should not be allowed to decrease anymore, that must be maintained at all costs.
ですので、そのいわゆる電通神話っていうのはですね、やはりこの日本人のメンタリティによるところが一番大きいんじゃないかなというふうに私は感じてます。
And so I personally feel that perhaps the mentality of the Japanese people is one of the biggest factors in creating this Dentsu myth.
それとですね、最後のご質問で、その新聞社がそのテレビ局と関連があるのではないかということは、それはもうその通りですね。これはクロスオーナーシップと言われているものですが、例えば読売ですと、これは日テレ系列と関係がありますよね。関係というか資本もありますよね。それと朝日新聞は当然テレ朝がありますよね。で、日経新聞は、テレ東ですよね。で、毎日が、TBS でしたっけ、というふうに完全につながってますよね。そこはもうつながっているので、当然新聞に、記事が載らなければテレビでも報道されないという形になります。
And in regards to the last part of your question and the relationship between the newspapers and television and the particular vulnerabilities in relation to that, it is, of course, exactly as you say. This cross-ownership is a very large factor here. We can see, for example, in the case of Yomiuri, they have the connection to Nippon Television, Asahi TV Asahi, the Nikkei to TV Tokyo, and Mainichi to TBS. So we can see there is a complete connection between these newspaper and television companies. Therefore, it's also natural that if something is not raised within the newspapers, it will also not be brought up on the television as well. This is very much connected.
そんな感じでよろしく。
テリー神保でビデオニュース、本間さんなので日本語で質問いたします。どうも今日はありがとうございます。この記者会見を主催している委員会の共同代表をしています神保です。本間さんね、要するに電通があまりにも強いので、例えば原発とかオリンピックとかのことはメディアは、はっきり言って自由に書けないって悪いことが書けない、ようなところ、他にもいろんなところが書けないことがあると、それもそれで大変問題なんですが、なんといっても一番書けないのは電通のことなわけですよね。でね、本間さんにぜひお聞きしたいのは、そもそもなぜ、ここまで、電白でも電通でもいいんですけどもはっきり言ってもこれは独禁法に触れると思われるくらいあまりにも集中度が特定の会社に集まってるわけでしょ。なぜまずここまで力を蓄えることが許されたのか、もちろん政治も怖いわけですよね、電通はね、いろいろスキャンダルも握ってるとかでね、なぜそこまでまず許されたのか、そしてそれをじゃあそれが明らかにいろんな意味で世論を歪めたりいろんな問題が出てることは明らかだけど誰も書かない、それを変えるために、何ができるのか、どこに弱点があるのかって言い方ですかね、どうも政治もできないメディアも何もできない、ほとんど弱点がないように見えると、このままこれが続くのかという意味でどこに弱点があるのか、最後に一点とはいえインターネットが来て、いわゆる既存のメディアは電通は強いけどインターネットでは必ずしもそこまでの圧倒的な力を出せてないと、それがインターネットに収録が移ることによってそこに変化の兆しが見えるのかどうか、ちょっとその3点をすみませんお願いします。
Hello, my name is Jimbo. I'm a member of the organizing committee here at the FCCJ. I would like to ask, first of all, in regards to, you mentioned about the strength of Dentsu and the way that this is leading to, restrictions on what can be reported on the issues of, for example, nuclear power plants, the media, and so on as well. I would like to ask furthermore, not only the reasons for this strength, but why it is that the concentration on the individual companies, whether either just Dentsu or Dentsu and Hakuhodo together, has been allowed or has been permitted to grow to this extent, despite the fact there are, of course, various scandals and so on in the background of this. The second part of the question, I would like to ask also, well, in order to change this situation, what do you believe either can or should be done? What vulnerabilities or weak points do you think there may be within this system? If we look at politics and the media and so on, perhaps it seems like, well, there aren't any weak points in some sense, but I would like to ask your opinion on that issue. And the third part of the question is, as we are now seeing the increased importance or emergence of the internet as a media, and this is a field where perhaps Dentsu does not maintain such a hold as they do on traditional media forms as well. I would like to ask, as there is this shift towards more of a focus on the internet media, if this will also potentially provide some space or some openness for a change in regards to that.
まずですね、最初のそのご質問で、どうしてこんなでっかくなっちゃったんだろうっていう話に関してはですね、先ほど来、僕はその電通を批判するようなお話はしてるんですけど、その電通のその実力っていうのも実は非常に僕は評価してるんですね。それは広告業界における、例えば CM、ものすごく楽しい CM 作るよねとか、いろんな仕掛けをやるよね、そういうところの力って確かに非常に強いんですよ。で別にその力がないのに、金だけ持ってるっていうわけでは決してないんですよね。それなりの実力っていうのはちゃんとあるんですよ。
First of all, in regards to why it is that Dentsu has grown to be such a vast size, I have mentioned many critical points in regards to Dentsu, but I would also like to mention that I do praise the capacity or skill of Dentsu as an ad agency as well. Within the advertising industry, for example, we see the commercials which Dentsu are producing, which are very enjoyable, very successful, and also the skills there as well. So it's not the case that Dentsu has no skill, but just has a lot of money. I would like to emphasize that that's not the situation we are looking at here.
ただしですね、それでなんでこんだけ集中したのかっていうと、さっきも言いましたけど、日本には一業種一社制っていう縛りがないですので、どんどん抱えることができる、いくらでも集まってきたらみんないらっしゃいいらっしゃいと言ってやることができるっていう、その制度上の欠陥が一つ一番大きいと思うんですが、もう一つは、やはりですね、そのバブルの崩壊以降、その広告費を出す企業にも余裕がなくなってしまってですね、失敗を極度に皆さん恐れるようになった。だから失敗しないところにオーダーするようになった。ですから電通と博報堂っていうのはやはりほぼ失敗しないんです、やらせるとですね。で、例えばじゃあ何かアクシデントがあっても会社が大きいんで何とかしちゃうんですよ。それはいろんな力を使うわけですけど、何とかしてしまう。ですから博報堂と電通に頼んでおけば安心だねっていうことで、多くの企業がどんどんやっぱり集まるようになっちゃったんですね。それはもうここのやっぱりバブル崩壊以降非常に顕著だと思います。でその一部ですけども、いわゆる、官庁ですね、要するに政府機関というのももうほとんど電通と博報堂に、やらせてます。で私も官庁、あれはどこだったっけ、農水省かどっかの、課長クラスなんかと話をしたときに、どうしてこれ博報堂電通ばっかりに頼むんですかって言ったら、私たちは税金で仕事をしているから失敗が許されないと。だから電通と博報堂に頼めばとんでもない失敗はないんだと。別に満足してるわけじゃないんだけどと。ただ失敗しないんで、なんとかつつがなくやることができる。だから全部電通と博報堂に振るんだよっていう話をしてた。でこういうメンタリティーがやはり全ての企業にもあって、どんどん電通と博報堂に集中しているんじゃないかと思います。
And in regards to why it is that there is such a concentration of clients on Dentsu, or Dentsu and Hakuhodo, I think that the point that I just mentioned before about the fact that there are no regulations or restrictions on an advertising agency looking after only one company from each industry has a large part to do with this. I think this is perhaps one of the largest systematic vulnerabilities in regards to what has led to this situation. The other important factor, I believe, is after the collapse of the bubble, there was a situation where companies no longer had the capacity to, have the space to really do something creative or different in terms of advertising. They were really fearing failure in regards to this. Therefore, in order to make sure that their advertising campaigns were successful, they felt that, well, if we ask Dentsu or Hakuhodo, then it will be okay. And even if there is some kind of an accident or problem comes up, these companies are big enough that they can look after, any aftermath or any troubleshooting that might come up as well. Therefore, it meant that many companies chose to go to either Dentsu or Hakuhodo because of this fear of having failures and so on as well, and relying on the two biggest actors in the industry. This is also the case not only for corporations but for government agencies as well. Almost all government agencies are working with either Dentsu or Hakuhodo. I had the chance actually to speak to someone senior from, I believe it was the Ministry of Agriculture in regards to this, and their answer was, well, the reason that we only use these two agencies is, of course, it is tax money that is going towards these campaigns. Therefore, we cannot have any failures. We need to ensure that it is done smoothly and successfully. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're happy with everything that Dentsu and Hakuhodo are doing, but we know that if we go with one of those two companies, there won't be any significant problems coming up as well. So I believe that this mentality of, going with the safest bet within these two countries is very much at play here.
で2つ目と3つ目、要するにどうにかならんのかっていう話とですね、インターネットがあってこれからどうだろうということは結構これ2つとも密接につながっていると思うんですね。
In regards to the second and third parts of your question and what to do from here with the current situation and the role of the internet, I believe that these two are very closely linked.
で、これ記憶に新しいですけど、去年オリンピックのエンブレムの問題で大変な騒ぎになりましたよね。
Of course, this is very fresh in everybody's memory, I'm sure, but last year was the significant issue about the emblem for the Olympics.
あれも結局はそのエンブレムを決めるときに、内部の限られた人たちの間で、勝手にっていうか、簡単に決めてしまおうとしたっていう、一言で言えばそういう話だったわけです。
And I think at the core of that problem at the time was the fact that, the decision around the decision on the emblem was being made in a very simple way just by a few limited people internally.
ですが、やはりインターネットがあったおかげでですね、その問題が瞬く間に広がって、でやはり相当なその批判がJOC に殺到したと。なので、結局は全て差し替えるというふうになったと思うんですね。ですからやはりインターネットが登場してきてそれなりの力を持ったおかげでですね、今までははっきり言って、こういった問題、特に電通が裏で仕切っている問題っていうのはほとんど、だってメディアが報道しないんですから誰も知らなかったんですけど、今では知ろうとする意識さえあれば一応大きな括りを知ることは可能にはなっていますよね。
However, thanks to the appearance or the strengthening of the internet, it meant that this issue or this problem actually spread quite widely. And this meant that there was criticism directed to the JOC at the time, which led to the changing of the emblem and so on. And this is very clearly connected to the fact that there is not only the appearance of the internet, but the internet also having greater influence on such issues. Of course, in the past, if there was such a problem, especially in regards to something in which Dentsu was involved or Dentsu at the reins, if this is not reported in the mainstream media, of course, the public or people would not know about this issue. However, due to the presence of the internet, it means that if people are finding information or wanting to find information themselves, they can at least find information about the overall pictures in relation to this. So I believe that this is having an impact in that sense.
ただこと電通のことに関することになるとですね、発言する人が極端に、減るので、もっとやっぱり発言する人たちが増えてほしいなというふうには思います。それとその電通がやはり相当やっぱりこの 4,5 年で売り上げを伸ばしてですね、僕はそろそろ日本の広告費の半分ぐらいにいっちゃってるんじゃないかと実は思ってるんですね。
However, in regards to issues relating to Dentsu, it's extremely few people who are speaking out about any relationship there or such issues as well. So I very much hope that from now more people can start to have a voice on these issues. One of the other important factors is the fact that in the past 4 or 5 years or so, actually the profits of Dentsu have been increasing greatly. I think it would probably not be excessive to say that now Dentsu is holding around half of all of the advertising fees within Japan.
ですので、そろそろよく眠ってるって言われてる公正取引委員会にですね、やっぱりきちんと調べさせて、独占禁止法に抵触しているかどうかを調べさせる時期に来てるんじゃないかというふうに、思ってます。でこれに関しては多分国会とかで1回ぐらい指さないとですねなかなか動かないので、ちょっと僕もある野党の政治家の方と、そういう議題を提出したらどうかという話をしています。
And I believe that it is coming up to the point where there should be an investigation undertaken or looking into by the Fairness Committee about whether Dentsu has in fact reached the levels of a monopoly in regards to its role within the advertising industry and so on. I think that to really raise this issue or to have the committee look into this, though, raising this as a question within the Diet would be vital. So I'm now actually in discussions with particular members from the opposition within the Diet as well to look at how this can be raised within question time there too.
そんな感じでいいですか。
Please stand.
Yeah, I put that pain.
It's okay. Give him the mic.
Sorry. I'm Keiji Matsushima, professional associate member for 20 years. I didn't know that Dentsu was such a villain and criminals. But however, I had been with Dentsu and subsidiaries for 43 years. So I must cover Dentsu's ass as a vigilante. I'm wondering where and how you get this kind of bullshit. Mr. Honma. For instance, you said that Tokyo Shimbun is the only newspaper criticizing Dentsu. But check out that Mainichi Shimbun dated May 20th. There's a huge articles bashing and criticizing Dentsu fiercely. And you said that the Dentsu's TV advertising is more than 30%, but it's a history, you know. Dentsu is getting the international 55% of profit, gross profit, out from international, thanks to the Aegis. So that, you know, we don't give a damn to that small, you know, scandals, which causes some scandals from the IOC or Tokyo metropolitan government. We are concentrating on the international advertisement. Aegis, thanks to the Aegis. Aegis is expanding. So I would like to say that what Honma-san says is that the history and the cliche of Dentsu. Thank you.
Did he have a question? すみません、ご質問はありますか？ Was there a question for Mr. Honma?
いやもうないってことだったので。
その情報はどこで入手しているのか。
情報って言うとどの情報？どのことを指してるんですか？
For instance, Mainichi Shimbun, you said only Tokyo Shimbun is the only paper who criticized Dentsu.
毎日新聞の方でも報道しているんじゃないでしょうか。
30% of the TV
そしてテレビも約3割が
sharing is the Dentsu
シェアを持っているという
less than
けれども
20%.
2割以下っていうふうに私は理解しています。
That's my question.
そのテレビのシェアですとかですね、新聞のシェアっていうのはこれは私たちっていうか、要するに私が代理店にいた時に いろいろなその書類の中で、学んだことです。ですので箱の中です。そうです、そうです、ヒストリーですよね。はい、ですからそこは、違う資料があるということは別に私は全く否定はしません。それとさっき東京新聞だけがと言ったのはですね、各社ちゃんと一応もちろん報道はしてます、裏金問題に関しては。ただし先ほども申し上げた通り、これだけの大きさで報道しているのは東京新聞しかありませんよと私は言った。毎日新聞はこんな大きくは報道してないです。
So first of all, in regards to the share in television and newspaper, these were rough figures based on my experience during my time working at Hakuhodo. Of course, if you have other figures which show different numbers in terms of the share, I'm open to hearing those. I'm not saying that these share figures and so on, they are estimates and they are rough figures from that time. So if you have other figures, of course, I will not deny that. Also, in regards to the Tokyo Shimbun, I, of course, recognize the fact that there are some small articles in some of the other newspapers as well. However, the point that I wanted to make is that it was in the Tokyo Shimbun who reported on such a large scale with the two-page story here as well. Anyway, thank you very much.
はい。
Siegfried Nittel, Austrian newspaper, der Standard. You said this kind of employ or to find these volunteers, a lot of volunteers, 100,000 volunteers for the Olympic, and to call it a kind of a criminal act because there is no insurance and all sorts of things. But I think from this is for me a problem. I think in Japan, young people like to work for a famous company, even if they don't get a lot of money. They work to perhaps as part-timer for companies like Starbucks, and they can tell their friend, "Oh, I'm working for Starbucks." It's enough. They don't think much about money. They think and so how to deal with people? How to explain them? It's not a good it's kind of a criminal act to engage them for the Olympic. How if the young people like to work for the Olympic? My other question is about the relations between Jiminto and Dentsu. In Germany, I'm from Germany. So in Germany, before a general election, the party select advertisement company for developing a kind of election strategy. So, but it's every time it changes. But they do develop with an advertising company together, develop a strategy. Is this the case in Japan also? Does Jiminto develop with Dentsu together an election strategy?
ですね、じゃあまず最初のボランティアをする人たちのボランティアをする気持ち、というのはやっぱそういうところで役に立ちたいっていう人たちももちろんいるわけなんで、それはそれでもちろん僕もそういう気持ちを持つことは非常にいいことだと思ってるんです。
First of all, in regards to your point on the volunteers, I of course do agree with the fact that there are people who wishing to volunteer and to be useful and to play some kind of a role in this is something to be praised. That is something good.
ですが、例えばですね、今日ちょっとボードにちょっとできなかったんですけど、すでにですね、ここに東京都教育委員会というのがですね、東京都オリンピック・パラリンピック教育というホームページを今作ってるんですけどね、この中でですね、支えるっていうので、要するにボランティアやりましょうよっていうことを言い出してるわけですよ。でこれをこういった教育を全ての学校で全部にやろうというふうに今してるんです。実はこういうことが始まってるんですね。
However, I didn't have time to prepare this into a panel today, but actually, for example, if you look at the homepage of the Tokyo Board of Education, you click on the point which says support, they actually have a section about education towards the Olympics and Paralympics, and within this, within the education which is planned to be conducted in all schools, it's also looking at calling for volunteers and so on.
で、先ほども申し上げたんですけど、お金がない時代、要するにロンドンオリンピックとかのそういうお金がなくて困っている時代に無償のボランティア精神を発揮して働いてもらうっていうのは、これは僕は非常に崇高なことだと思うんですが、今日ご説明した通り、ものすごくお金を集めているところがある一方で、無償のその崇高なその使命感をですね、利用して自分たちはお金を払わないでただで人を使おうとしているっていう体制ができつつあるんじゃないかと、そこに僕は危惧を持っているんですね。
And if we look back to, for example, the time of the London Olympics, where there were not sufficient funds to carry out the Olympics without having volunteers, I believe that the spirit of people who worked for free in order to ensure that they could take place is something praiseworthy. However, when we look at the amount of funds which have already been collected for the Tokyo Olympics, and the fact that many people would be working for completely free and at their own expense, actually, without their efforts being paid for and so on, I believe that this could lead to exploitation in the sense that the system or carrying out the Olympics really based on this positive will of the people who are wanting to do something.
あと2つ目は何でしたっけ？
そうですね。2つ目の
そうですね。はい。そうですね。自民党とその電通っていうのはもうとにかく選挙関係なくずっと一緒です。ずっと要するに。選挙がなくても当然自民党のその広報っていうのは選挙がない期間もありますから、そこに関してもずっともちろん電通にお願いしているということです。
Next, in regards to the LDP and Dentsu connection, their relationship is not just during the election campaign or the election period as well. They work together for the advertising and promotions and so on during non-election periods as well. So their partnership is ongoing.
で、これは普通のそのクライアント、要するにスポンサーと日本の広告会社とスポンサーの間に非常によくあることなんですけど、そのセレクションを一回一回やると面倒くさいと。で、非効率であると。であるならば同じ相手とずっとお付き合いすると。そうすることによって情報が途切れないでずっと伝達されていく。だからそっちの方が効率的だというふうに考えるのが、日本の、いわゆる広告の考え方なんですね。ですからそれは電通と、自民党の関係もずっと同じです。
And so the common passion or the common practice for the relationship between sponsors and advertising agencies in Japan is that it's thought to be quite troublesome or inefficient to have a selection process each time. So rather than changing the agency to work with and so on, they maintain a relationship ongoing throughout that time. This means that also information is passed on, between the people in charge and so on, and making what is seen as a more efficient way of working. And I think this is not just the case for the Dentsu and LDP relationship, but also the common style of working within the Japanese advertising industry.
そんな感じでいいですか？大丈夫ですか？
Sorry.
もう一人。
We have two follow-ups now.
You know what I meant is has Dentsu a kind of influence of the election strategy? What would be most important to tell the voters to win a majority? Does Dentsu talk with Chimindo about it?
それに関してはですね、実はそういったその細かい戦略に関しては、いわゆるマーケティング会社、電通以外のマーケティング会社からもいろいろと情報を仕入れています。で、電通はどちらかというと、もちろん電通のマーケティング局がいろんな提案はするわけですけれども、一番強いのはやはりどのメディアにどれぐらいお金をかければその選挙民に自民党の声が届くか そういうことを考えるのが、主として電通の仕事なんですね。ですから、いろいろなもっと細かい政策をどうしたらいいかとか、そういうことに関しては電通も提案しているけれども、さまざまな PR 会社や、マーケティング会社から、いろいろな提案を受けているというふうに聞いています。
In regards to the very detailed aspects of the strategy, there are many other marketing companies and so on which are involved or have contracts for providing information and marketing and so on. Of course, Dentsu may make proposals in regards to some things, but rather than the detailed or the policy side of things, this is more looking at what media is the most effective for advertisement to be placed in, which media should have how much of the budget allocated and so on to make sure that the LDP voice is reaching those who it should be reaching. So rather than on the detailed policy side of things, the role that I believe Dentsu plays in regards to that relationship is more looking at what advertising where and that side of things. And this is also not only proposals coming from Dentsu, but a various range of other PR and marketing companies will also be employed to provide proposals and so on in relation to that.
Follow up on the answer. When I ask you if there is a possibility of corruption in the issue of the Tokyo Olympics, you told me if I was involved with the process, I would certainly do it. And our moderator said, so you bribe people. My question is, in regard to the French investigation currently now about Diak, this is very serious. French justice doesn't do something like that just for catching attention. It's based on probably very big informations. Can you unfold the future scenario? What could happen from Japan, who said it would cooperate with France on this issue, or maybe the IOC? Now, some people do not really trust always the IOC today. It's unfortunately, but they certainly have more confidence in justice. So what do you think would happen on Tokyo's side about this investigation of Tokyo alleged corruption? On the Japanese side, I'm interested. Thank you.
ですね、そうですね、やはり先ほども言いましたけれども、やはりこの世界、特にフランスの検察が今これを調べていて、そのいわゆる真剣度っていうのは先ほどから言ってる通り、日本ではあまり感じられてないんですよね。やはり扱いがさっきから言ってますけど小さいので、なんかフランスが勝手にやってるよなみたいな、そういう雰囲気がある。でフランスのその検察がですね、じゃあ例えば JOC の人間を、喚問するというふうに言って JOC がはいそうですかって言って従うかっていうと、おそらくしないというふうに思います。で相当これはフランス検察が力を強く出てですね、証拠をきちんと固めて、だってこうだろうっていうふうにかなり大きく扱わない限りは、多分日本の中では無風かだんだんと報道が少なくなっていくんじゃないかなっていうふうに、感じてます。ですからそこはすいません、大変無責任な言い方になってしまうんですが、本当にフランス検察頼みというふうに僕はちょっと感じてます。
Thank you for your question. As you mentioned, of course, the seriousness of the investigation being undertaken by the French prosecutors at the moment, I believe, is not yet so much felt in Japan. I believe an understanding or an appreciation of the seriousness of the matter is perhaps not shared very broadly in Japan yet. The fact that, for example, it's featured in the media, in only a very small way, I think demonstrates this. I think many people perhaps have the perspective that, well, France is just conducting some kind of investigation on its own without fully understanding the implications of this. If the French prosecutors do go ahead and, for example, call the JOC representatives and so on for going through with this, I would have questions about to what level this cooperation would necessarily go ahead. Therefore, I think that unless the French prosecutors can come forward and show very strong evidence that will really push this forward, the most likely scenario is that here in Japan it will either have less and less attention or less reporting on the matter as well. So perhaps it may seem like somewhat of an irresponsible way to express it, but I think it's very much dependent on what the French prosecutors and their investigation can bring up and bring forth from now.
日本でのその報道がですね、やはりそんなに強くないというのは、やはりもうこの表を見れば明らかなんですよね。もう東京五輪はですね、もう完全に企業の祭典なんですよ。 これだけの日本の主要企業がスポンサーになってるんで、今更ですね、そんな中止なんてありえない。中止なんかされたら困るわけですよ、これらの企業は。だってもう150億とか、1社150億とか60億とか払っちゃってて、まだ全部額は払ってないかもしれないですけども、この段階でもし東京五輪がじゃあ剥奪されるとかっていうことになったら、それは当然大騒ぎになりますよね。
And so in regards to the reason that perhaps this is not very strong within the reporting in Japan, I think if you have a look at this panel, it makes the reasons very clear. The Tokyo Olympics have become a festival for corporations, and we can see the list here of so many major Japanese companies for whom it would be extremely problematic if the Olympics were to be cancelled. They have already put forward, whether it's the 15 billion yen, even if the full amount has not necessarily been paid yet. At this stage, if there is some kind of a cancellation or a danger that the Olympics may not be held, this would be something extremely problematic for all of these corporations.
そうなりますとですね、やはり報道、例えばニュース番組にこれらの企業がスポンサードしていたらですね、そういうニュース番組で、五輪問題を集中的に扱うっていうのは、スポンサーはあんまりいい顔しないんですよね。でそういうことを、電通とか博報堂の営業担当者は、テレビ局に伝達していくわけです。
And therefore, if we consider the media, news, television program, for example, which has these companies as its sponsors, of course, if they were to report or have a focus on the Olympics issues as well, this is not something that the sponsors would be incredibly happy about. And this is something which those who are responsible for the client relations or the sales within Dentsu and Hakuhodo will, of course, pass this kind of information on to their clients.
ですので、なかなか日本の中でですね、この問題を、クリアにする、また告発を続けていくっていうことは、現時点では相当難しいのではないかなというふうに残念ながらそう思ってますが。
Therefore, I believe that unfortunately it is still rather difficult in Japan to clarify this issue or raise these kinds of issues as well.
Okay, we have more follow-ups. That will be the last one. Sorry to be waiting, but it's very interesting information.
It will be very quick. NHK はなんで電通に弱いんですか広告を全く使ってない NHK がなぜこの問題を報じないのかお願いします。
I would like to ask a very simple question. Why is it that NHK is so weak against Dentsu, despite the fact that it does not have this reliance on the advertising money?
広告はもちろんですね、全然扱ってないんですけど、子会社とかで人的な交流が非常にあるんですよね。電通とNHK というのは映像専門の会社を両社が人間出して作ってたりとかですね。ですが民放よりはもちろんそういうプレッシャーというのは感じてないはずです。ですからそこはですね、そういった問題をやらないのは電通に気を使ってるっていうのは、民放とか他の新聞社なんかよりは割合は低いんですが、多少はあるんですけれども、それプラス先ほどから言ってる通り、もう五輪にケチなんかつけたくないと。だってもう五輪なんとかやるっていうのはこれ安倍政権の規定路線ですからね。これによって経済なんとかしようっていう話でこれだけ一生懸命いろいろやってるわけですから、ですからどちらかというと、この電通とこの JOC の問題を NHK があんまりやらないのは、僕は電通に対する気遣いというよりも、政権に対する気遣いじゃないかなというふうに思ってます。
Well, of course, in regards to the advertisement, NHK does not have this kind of relationship. However, there are various personal connections within subsidiary companies and so on between NHK and Dentsu and so on. There are various relationships, joint visual production companies and so on as well. However, I think that the NHK would, of course, feel much less pressure than perhaps commercial broadcasters would. The reason I feel that NHK is not so much raising these issues of the JOC controversies and so on is not so much because of Dentsu, but more not wanting to damage in regards to the preparations for the Olympics themselves. The Olympics, of course, being something which is at the core of Prime Minister Abe's wanting to go forward in regards to an improvement for the economy and so on as well. Therefore, I believe that NHK is not reporting on the Dentsu or JOC related issues is not so much because of its relationship or any kinds of pressure from Dentsu as such, but more taking particular consideration for the administration.
Sorry we have last question. Very short question.
very quick and basically closing the circle, because we are now talking about politics and Dentsu, and I would like to know, you mentioned the role Dentsu played to put pressure on media. Do you think that this also applies, that the LDP can also use Dentsu, and the government also can use Dentsu to put pressure on media? In the past few years, since Prime Minister Abe came into power, the reports are rising that journalists don't feel as free as before to write about what they think is important. Japan also dropped in the freedom of the press rankings. Do you think that Dentsu is also basically transmitting political pressure?
そうですね、でも僕はあんまりそこはあんまり感じていないんですけど、要するにその電通がごめんなさい、自民党が電通を使って圧力をかけてるのかというよりも、やはり安倍政権が非常に強硬な感じがしてますよね。特に別に自民党なんかごめんなさい、電通を使わなくても相当プレッシャーをかけているんじゃないかっていう気が、してます。
Personally, I don't so much feel that that is the case, that there is such a situation where the LDP is using or going through Dentsu to put pressure on the media and so on. I think if we look at how much Prime Minister Abe is really pushing, or really in a very rough way pushing things forward in this, it shows that even without relying on, without going through Dentsu, he or the government can put its pressures on directly. So I don't think there is so much a case of going via Dentsu in regards to that.
その政権党と一緒にいるっていうことは非常に重要なことではあるんですけれども、電通が持っているですね、巨大クライアントなんていうのは、例えばトヨタですとか、ソニーですとかなんていうのはですね、年間全世界で1000億円とかそういう規模で広告費を使うわけですよ。でそういうところを全て担当してるんで、どちらかというと自民党の言うことを聞いてるよりも、そういう企業の面倒を見てた方が、彼らの収入にはなるんですよね。ですから、そこのところはあんまり政治とつるんでるとはいえ、自民党のエージェントとして各メディアに圧力をかけてるっていう感じは僕はあんまりしてません。
And so, well, of course, the connection between Dentsu and the government is, of course, important. However, when you also look at the kind of very significant or very large clients which Dentsu holds, for example, companies like Toyota and Sony, who are having, annual advertising budgets in the hundreds of billions per year, I think that it's not so much that they are looking at or listening to what the government is saying, perhaps, but it's more in the interest of Dentsu to be looking after the interest of their corporate clients as well. Therefore, of course, there are these connections there, but I don't believe that we could say that the LDP is necessarily using Dentsu to put pressure in that sense as well. Dentsu has other things on its mind.
Thank you very much. We passed the time, and it's very interesting discussion. Thank you very much for your insights, and you're willing to extend the time. And special thanks to our interpreter, Miss Joyce. You got a little bit over time, but it's okay. And I would like to extend 1 year honorary membership to our guest, Mr. Honma, for being a guest of the club, and you could come anytime within a year and tell us more about these details. And welcome you again. That's membership. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Thank you very much.